Hey everyone, and welcome to Seriously Risky Business, the podcast we do here at Risky Biz HQ, which is all about cyber policy and intelligence. My name's Patrick Gray, and we will be chatting with Tom Uren in just a moment. He is, of course, our policy and intelligence editor here at Risky Business Media, and we'll be talking through his newsletter, which goes out once a week, and you can subscribe to that one by going to risky.biz. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation for supporting Tom's work, and also Lawfare Media for their support. They, of course, syndicate Tom's work, so you can read it on Lawfare Media if you don't want to read it in your inbox. The choice is yours. So, of course, we're going to talk through a few things now, Tom, and we've just wrapped up the edit for this week's show. And one of the big things you covered was growing calls in liberal democracies around the world to at least talk about banning the social media website formerly known as Twitter, X. So there have been some credible commentators in the UK who are saying, look, we just need to get rid of this thing. What's striking about all of this, though, is are the similarities between the discussion around this and the discussion of TikTok as a foreign-owned, foreign-controlled social media website that presents a threat, right? Particularly around things like propaganda.
Yeah, so that is quite striking. So what made me interested in this is there's a couple of pieces that have come out, commentators saying we should ban X, and I've written about TikTok over the last few years, and to me the strongest argument for the US to ban TikTok is that it's a potential vessel for Communist Party influence in the US. The Communist Party could, at any moment, pull the levers and swing the political discourse in the US in whichever way it wants.
Yes, and the potential abuse is alarming.
Yeah, but when you look at X, everything that you worry about TikTok potentially doing is happening right now, today, and has been happening for, pretty much ever since Elon Musk took it over.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen the Nazis come back, and we just see a lot of misinformation, a lot of really fringe stuff, which I guess in the United States isn't necessarily regarded as fringe anymore, but to those of us outside America, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's right. And so it's it sort of looking at it through the lens of why TikTok's a problem. It's just super clear that, yes, this is a problem. Governments should probably do something about it. So some of it, in fact, is it all of it, is just about Elon Musk himself. So he has gotten his profile to be basically amplified. I think in Twitter they call it the sort of power user multiplier or something like that.
Musk mode.
It applies just to Elon Musk.
Yeah. And
so his account bypasses checks and balances that try and make sure that what you are showing to people is interesting. And so he bypasses all the gatekeepers and just, I think the figure I saw is that it's 1,000-fold multiplier effect. So whenever you open up X, like, he's there all the time.
Yeah. I mean, you know what's interesting about this, and we talked about this during the edit, is you're not actually an X user, right? So whereas you used to. Yeah.
Used to.
So I still lurk just because there's people who post stuff there that I want to see. But sometimes, I just have to turn it off kind of thing, because the stuff that flows through the, sort of tailored for you feed, it's not just Musk stuff. Like, I literally had to block him. And a lot of people have, because of this thing where just anytime he tweets, it shows up in everybody's feeds because he's engineered it to be that way. So you can block him and you can deal with that problem. But it's the stuff that is boosted by that platform now, which isn't just, to be clear, this isn't just conservative perspectives. I mean, the outright Nazi stuff is voluminous. And it's boosted. It is really boosted. Anything sort of that's not that does not really get boosted. You might see a little bit of it, but it is just so obvious. As you wrote in your piece, it's as subtle as a sledgehammer.
Yeah. And so from a foreign government's perspective, why would you put up with that? What's the, in most countries you have foreign media ownership laws, and I think basically I guess we've made the analogy of TikTok before. It's like a publisher, and so why would you accept a foreign publishing house publishing all sorts of propaganda, misinformation, promoting things you just don't believe in as a society in general?
Well, things that are divisive and can cause problems. I mean, you point out in this, you quote a Guardian article from January, which is, looking at how he's endorsed the far-right party, the AfD in Germany. He's been targeting the British Labour Party as well, really hammering them, saying that the government there is protecting the interests of immigrants in Britain over those of native-born citizens. I mean, it's his typical sort of, anti-immigrant shtick. We also saw issues in Brazil where he had refused to suspend accounts of people who were involved in a attempted overthrow of the government there, which led to X temporarily at least being banned within Brazil. And, he said they would never back down. And of course they backed down after about a week and a half or something, and service was restored. But, I think there's it's interesting for us as an Australian publication, because I don't think people inside the United States quite understand, first of all, how this sort of stuff plays outside of the US, that the United States attitudes towards free speech are kind of outliers as well. I don't think Americans quite understand that, most of them anyway. And just, how much this platform is now being seen as a sort of fascist propaganda tool. I just don't think they get it.
The other thing that occurs to me is that it's very closely associated with the Trump administration because of Musk. And the Trump administration is not popular anywhere, except maybe Russia.
Well, and the United States, where he's still polling okay,
Yeah, and so that association with maybe malign is probably not too strong. Malign political influence on your own democracy is a serious problem. Now, Elon, he's an American. He can have an opinion. He can buy Twitter and shout that opinion, whatever. But it's different when you're a citizen of a country, I think. Well, it is different. And so from a European or a German or an Australian, like, why should Elon have an outsized voice? He's got lots of other ways to express his opinion. We don't need to have it shoveled down upon us on a social media platform. And so I think that's the argument, and I think it makes a whole lot of sense. That's the same argument that was run for TikTok, one of the arguments, and the US Congress passed a law to at least attempt to try and mitigate that risk. Whether anything substantial ever happened to TikTok, who knows? But I think the fact that the law got passed indicates that there's, the US Congress recognized that problem. This is the exact same problem, just for everyone else outside the US.
Yeah, and I think the most interesting part of what you've written this week, I think, is that this really wasn't on the agenda until very recently. I think, just everything that's happening with the United States kind of decoupling from its traditional allies and acting the way it's acting has sort of changed the way people see the United States, and in turn, the way they see Musk and his, viewpoints. Let's just put it that way. So I think, just the change to the way policymakers are perceiving the United States on the global stage has made this. I think there's a line we've got in the newsletter about how this is now, discussions of a ban are now within the Overton window. Yeah. They're now within the window of acceptable political discourse, whereas even a few months ago, that was just not the case.
I think there is, to me at least, there's a strong sense of there was a deal. Part of the deal was that the US would be a good ally. Other countries would accept trade terms that, say, benefited US copyright holders. And we wouldn't ban or think of banning US tech companies. It was kind of, a quid pro quo. I think that deal's just gone up in flames. And so it's I think, reevaluating what we gave up to get that deal is now on the table.
Yeah. It's As they say, may you live in interesting times. Now, another thing that you've taken a look at this week is following up on comments by Rob Joyce to the Chinese Communist, to the Chinese Communist Party, to the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party in the U.S. Congress. Of course, Rob Joyce was a special advisor to the U.S. President Trump, term one. He also was ran the cybersecurity directorate at NSA. He's a very well-regarded person in cybersecurity. And he's come out and he's really heavily criticized the Trump administration for its, essentially arbitrary firings in NSA. Now, we covered this with him on the weekly show yesterday, where he was a special guest co-host, and thanks again to him for that. So you've written up some of the comments he made at the at the House committee, and also some of the comments he made to us. But I wanted to ask you for your perspective on this. As someone who worked for a signals intelligence agency for a very long time, what's your immediate feeling on just how damaging this is? Because Joyce's opinion seems to be that this is actually really quite bad, at least for the medium, not just the short term, but at least the medium term of the NSA. What's your take here, Tom, on what all this means and what it's going to do to the workforce?
Yeah, so I was thinking as I was going into writing this piece, what makes an intelligence agency different from any other federal government agency? Is there a magic difference to, say, working in any other bureaucracy? And I think that there is, in that many of the things you do in intelligence agencies are just somewhat, if you're working inside them, you would call them special. If you're outside them, you might say that they're unique. And if you hate intelligence agencies, you would say that they're illegal. But the point is that there's a lot of things you do inside that just don't get done outside in the real world. Sometimes that's because what you're doing would be illegal if you were doing it in the real world. Sometimes it's because they've invested so much in staying ahead of the public state of the art that it's like no one outside knows what's going on, and so you can't learn those skills.
Yeah, so you can't just hire graduates who know how to do this stuff, I guess, is the point.
Yeah. So when I started, someone said to me on the recruitment panel, I think they said something like, there is no university degree for signals intelligence. And that is slightly different in cyber, but I think broadly it applies. And so there are these quite long pipelines of in-house training development programs that occur. And I was kind of looking back at my own career, and it feels like it's, now that I'm old and wise, it feels like it takes you 2 or 3 years to start to actually be productive. I mean, that's probably a slight exaggeration, but the thing is, when you interrupt those pipelines, you're actually sort of cutting a hole across the organization in a slice where you've got this gap in skills that over time will
cause problems.
Cause problems. And so I think there's that, like the immediate short-term effect, but there's also the longer-term effect of, if you make those pipelines, like taking a job there, risky. Part of the deal is that you lose, it just makes the job a whole lot less attractive. So a lot of the people who go into those organizations do so because they recognize that the work will be very interesting. I'll get to do something that will help the country, but I'll probably get paid less than I could in the private sector. And so if you make that deal less attractive by removing job security, I think that's also a problem.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, Rob talked about that as well, which is that, yeah, I mean, would you want to sign up at this point, I guess is the question, right? When the job security is just not there, are you prepared to eat the rest of the you-know-what sandwich in order to go and do that job? And the answer would be probably not.
I mean, I think the other thing is that under the Trump administration, you don't actually know what the mission is.
Yeah.
In the past, it was quite clear that you would be prosecuting, I guess I would call them traditional adversaries. I don't know what the mission will be in the future.
Yeah. Grim, actually. But we're going to wrap it up there. It's a short one this week, but Tom Uren, thank you so much for your wonderful work as always this week. And again, people can go to risky.biz and just scroll down to where it says newsletters, and you can find both of our newsletters there, and you can subscribe to them. A pleasure to chat to you as always, my friend, and we'll do it again next week.
Thanks, Patrick.